and good evening. Welcome to the Worldview 2 Washington Report for Friday evening, May 16th, 2025. Let's have Jim Paff, our co-host and the executive director of the conservativecaucus.org, theconservativecaucus.org, join us from our nation's capital. Jim, welcome. Thanks for being with us on this Friday evening.
Thanks so much. By the way, President, but that's okay. I just want to make
President.
people know I run the show.
All right. Sorry about that. I know some guys go by executive director, some go by president. I should have asked.
No, I know. They all mean the same thing, it seems.
Let's talk about a few things. One of them is a video that's out there. And of course, we got to get to James Comey and all kinds of things. But here is a video today that was out today. Watch this. You can respond to this. People are getting really frustrated. Here we go. With these kind of guys.
Hey, for the members, listen up. I do not anticipate us coming back today. I've had some questions. I know most of you are trying to get home. Go home. I'll let you know this weekend if we're going to return first thing Monday. I think that's the goal at this point. But just know that the weekend is yours and your family's. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. A lot of people are getting frustrated in the MAGA world. They really feel like the Republicans, some of them are dragging their feet. I mean, I don't know why they can't work through the weekends, why they can't get this done. I mean, there are a lot of Americans that work 7 days a week. I know a guy in my town. He has 2 or 3 kids, a wife. He works 3 jobs. 3 jobs. He works at a grocery store. He works at Walgreens. He works at a retirement home. He puts in over 16-hour days. I went into the drugstore the other day to get something. There he was. I've known him for years because I shop at that drugstore and I shop at that grocery store, and I see him at both places, and I've known him and visited with him for years. And I said, man, I just have to tell you, I respect you for how many hours you work. And he said, well, I also work over at the retirement home too. And I said, yeah, my wife told me that. She ran into you and said that you'd mentioned it too. This guy, he said, yeah, I work 16 to 18 hours every day. You're telling me these guys in the Republican Party can't put their fannies in a chair and work over the weekend like so many Americans do to make ends meet?
I have to tell you that I spent 8, almost 9 years working on Capitol Hill as a chief of staff. And there are many times where it's appropriate to not work through the weekend. But when you've got these serious things that greatly affect the American people on the line, and you're not willing to do that with the $174,000 a year paycheck, he mentioned you all can go get your flights. Well, yeah, I mean, those flights are paid for out of the members' representational allowance in each of those members' office. So they get their flights taken care of. There are a lot of perks and benefits. And by the way, lots of frustrations too. It sucks, but that's what you ran for. So get your freaking work done. And it's not appropriate to, to handle it this way. I'll tell you what they will do though, when they will make people work or put them in a stressful situation, is when they want to shove through these continuing resolutions that have all the Christmas tree items for all the lobbyists and so forth right before Christmas. They'll threaten to keep them home from Christmas, but they won't keep them home at times like this. It's really absurd. Now, there's a big debate about the cuts. Listen, they should be cutting a whole lot more out of this budget. That's my position. And they don't like the fact that Chip Roy and some of the other conservatives are saying, why are we not doing more to put cuts here? I mean, it's the biggest laydown in the world. They won't do it. So there's that aspect of it too. But Congress is a mess. I keep saying it. The weakest part of the Trump agenda is Republicans in Congress.
Well, and what is Mike Johnson doing? I mean, there's a lot of frustration growing with him. Is there not?
I think there is, and he's got the favor of Trump right now, to be candid. And there are a couple little things that he's doing better than he's done before, but he's not doing anything that is changing the way that this thing works. And he could do it and he won't do it. And
Why? Why? Is he
because
compromise?
yeah, go ahead.
I mean,
Well,
Michael Yon
Yeah.
says mice. What cheese? What cheese has he been controlled by? Mice. And it stands for 5 things. One of them is what is it, Logan? Mice. One of them is ideology, career, ego, money is the first one. Thank you. Money, ideology, career or coercion, and ego. So which one is it, Mike Johnson?
By the way, career, ego, money. I don't know how much ideology in terms of the positive sense of that word comes into play in Washington, D.C. anymore. But it is money.
That's a big statement. That's a big statement.
Yeah.
You're telling me that a lot of people don't have an ideology. They don't have convictions. They don't have principles, right?
Yeah. Listen, it's the uniparty in Washington, D.C. I mean, I know Democrats are being really crazy and stupid right now, and they're going to pay a price for that, I think, in the long run. But at the core of it, the stuff that they will not cut in this bill are things that are mutually agreed upon by the most controlling members of each party's conference. And that is a big, big issue. I mean, why is there not an elimination of the USAID funding in this bill? Why is the Department of Education money not being eliminated in this bill? Why is there not a change in the funding related? Why is there not Medicaid reform in this bill that Chip Roy keeps calling about? That's easy to do, and problems that DOJ has clearly laid out. And so they don't want this to happen because they all either agree upon it or they maintain their détente. You know, there's keep the welfare programs and keep the defense budget. That was the détente for many, many decades that Republicans and Democrats have had. You can have your Democrat stuff. We just get our Republican stuff. By the way, and it's always defense. It's never anything really good. So, although defense is good, but this is the problem in Washington, D.C. Mike Johnson has not changed that paradigm. I think he's had an historic chance to do so, but he's decided not to.
He has had an historic chance to do so, but chose not to. That's a great line. The man could have gone down in history. He could have been a Newt Gingrich type figure. I don't agree with Newt Gingrich on some things, but at least Newt gave us the contract with America, and he went down the checklist, and he had to work with Bill Clinton and try to get some things done. And Bill Clinton reached across the aisle and did some things. Again, there's some things where I would disagree with Newt, but what if Newt Gingrich, what were your thoughts about Newt in his history when he was speaker? And do you think that, well, Mike Johnson could learn from some of what Newt did?
Every Speaker of the House could learn from the first 100 days of Newt Gingrich's speakership. I always say Newt Gingrich was one of the greatest speakers of the House for 100 days. And it went kind of downhill from there, although there were some good victories after that. But it was the first 100 days that really mattered there. And it did radically and positively transform Congress. I mean, that was actually an historic change to the way Congress works that was mostly very, very positive. And yes, Mike Johnson could do that if he really determined to do so. This bill is the one he could do it on. He could come in over the weekend, sit down all the leaders and say, listen, this isn't flying. We are going to go do these things, and we're going to tell such and such and so in our conference to pound sand. And if they don't do it, we're going to make them pay for it. Do you actually understand? Kevin McCarthy was on Fox News today saying that if Chip Roy and Ralph Norman and these guys don't vote for it, they're voting for a tax increase. What are you talking about? Yeah, the tax reform, actually what Jason Smith did on the tax reform is pretty darn good. It goes a lot farther than we've ever gone in a few areas. But to say that the problem is Chip Roy and Ralph Norman after DOJ and the massive win we had in November that called for massive cutting and dealing with immigration, I don't even know where Kevin McCarthy's mind is, but that's the mindset. It's always the people who want to cut who are the problem. That stubborn way of thinking is one of the biggest reasons we got so much problem in Congress. And I will say this, no one's going to remember Mike Johnson unless he changes course. Everybody's going to remember Donald Trump because he has radically transformed so many things already, and we're not even halfway through the year of his first year.
And of course, the big red flag with me when I was when I found out in the conservative, so-called conservative movement, particularly the religious right, who some of Mike Johnson's friends were. When I found out who some of his friends were in the religious right when he first got chosen as speaker, I thought, these are not strong leaders. These are politicians posing as pro-family leaders. So right away, I had a red flag. Then I see within first few days, a picture's taken and put online where he's walking down the stairs at the U.S. Capitol with Paul Ryan. So the question is he listening to Paul Ryan? Is Mike Johnson a Paul Ryan, Mike Pence figure?
You know, he'd have to work really hard to be that bad. So in that sense, no. Does Paul Ryan have his ear? Absolutely. McCarthy has his ear as well. And particularly Paul Ryan, who truly is one of the worst speakers of the House ever. He hates Donald Trump. He still does to this day. He is in every way undermined what Donald Trump has done. He's no friend of conservatives. He's no friend of Republicans who support Donald Trump. He is a friend of the never-Trumpers and those who want to undermine anything that Donald Trump is doing. Mike Johnson could have changed course. I wrote an article about the time that Mike Johnson became speaker. There was that big picture of all the members of Congress praying with him. And I laughed at a few of them that were there, but they were just being courteous. But the headline of that article was, okay, so you prayed, now what? Listen, I'm an evangelical, Bible-believing Christian. I follow Jesus Christ from my heart. But I have to say that it frustrates me, the people who put out the name of Christ and do pray, but they never take any actions. Yeah, we pray and seek God's help and favor. Mostly what we need is to repent in our personal lives to set everything straight and to get our mind aligned with Him to take action. And that's what a lot of so-called Christian members of Congress lack. They don't take action, but they do put up platitudes quite a bit.
Well,
it's very frustrating to me.
Maybe go into your closet and pray instead of making it a public thing for political motivation. I don't want to judge their heart, but I think a lot of this is political fodder for the internet. Oh, you can trust him. He loves Jesus. Yeah.
I wish we could do that because Chuck Coulson wrote in the foreword to his Kingdoms in Conflict many years ago, and it was about the time Pat Robertson had run, or I can't remember when the book came out, or was about to run for president. And he put up this scenario of, okay, we finally elect a Christian president. And then he makes a scenario with knowledge, because he worked in a significant White House, of everything falling apart and his Christianity didn't matter so much. I have been saying a lot privately, every once in a while publicly, and I'm about to say it right now. When I left Capitol Hill in 2018 and 18. And so I knew or was acquainted with every professing Christian member of Congress. And I have to say, and this is going to seem very harsh, but I think it's right, that the majority of confessing Christians in Congress vote like Satan. Why do I say that? Because they're antinomians in a political sense. They don't believe law matters. We've got this Constitution sitting out in front of everybody. I do not believe most members of Congress know the Constitution, the vast majority of them. Maybe no more than half of them have ever read it at all, unless they happen to take some class in school. And they don't even consider what that document says when they vote. There are members who do that, but there are a whole bunch who don't. And yet these people who claim Christ know that God's law is immutable and somehow can't respect the law of our own land right there in the Constitution. So there are very easy arguments to make, easy ways to understand where we ought to go. It's right there in our founding document. We're not even the United States without the Constitution. And if they would just consult that, they would get better advice than than Paul Ryan whispering in their ear about what direction we ought to go.
100%. Well said. Look at this. House Freedom Caucus. Reps Roy Norman Breach, Clyde, and others continue to work in good faith to enact the president's big, beautiful bill. We were making progress before the vote in the Budget Committee, and we'll continue negotiations to further improve the reconciliation package. We are not going anywhere, and we will continue to work through the weekend. Really? Well, I don't think that video we just played doesn't show that's the case.
No, that's the committee taking, that was the committee chairman permitting the committee members to go home. And by the way, he wants them to go home because the negotiations are going to happen with them anyway.
So how did this tweet get put out then?
Because the House Freedom Caucus members are going to keep working through the weekend.
Okay.
I guarantee you that they're going to be bugging Mike Johnson, going to his door, talking to him about what they'd like to have. I'm very certain, Chip Roy said it publicly, and I'm very certain he is going to be here in this town all weekend long working. This is the difference. We have this system in Washington, D.C., where the leadership writes all the bills, throws it in front of the members. By the way, the leadership consults with Democrat leadership or vice versa, depending on who's in the majority. They consult with them on what to write in the bill, and then they put it out in front of the members with no opportunity to offer amendments on the floor, no opportunity to have a say. We decided because we determined that this is what we needed to do to pass this. And it's an absurd system that shuts out members of Congress. But the House Freedom Caucus folks are committed to working hard to getting to the right place on this, if at all possible.
Let's go to what everybody's talking about, and that's James Comey. Listen to this clip.
Gabbard's the director of national intelligence. Are you buying that the former FBI director didn't know what 86 Trump meant?
Absolutely not, Jesse. That is a ridiculous and insane statement to make, certainly within this context, but especially coming from a guy who's the former director of the FBI, a guy who spent most of his career prosecuting mobsters and gangsters, people who know and execute other humans and use this exact lingo of 86. Comey himself admitted in his follow-on message that he knew that this was a political statement. Well, the only reason he knew that, Jesse, was because a little over a month ago, a bunch of anti-Trump, anti-Elon Musk protesters were proliferating the use of this 8647 slogan, which was a veiled call to action to murder the sitting president of the United States. So for Comey to think that we, the American people, are so stupid as to think that he, as a former FBI director, former prosecutor, and someone who clearly pays attention to what's going on, would believe his lie that he didn't know what this actually was calling for. The dangerousness of this, Jesse, cannot be underestimated. When we have 2 assassination attempts on the president's life, when we have people who look to guys like Comey, who've been celebrated by MSNBC and the Democrat elite and CNN as the beacon of integrity, the law and order guy, the guy who would tell the truth no matter what the consequences. This is the guy who's issuing a hit on President Trump, the president that the American people voted for. So it's guys like Comey and others who call the president the modern day Nazi, people who are in great positions of influence, who are saying that President Trump poses an existential threat to our country. These are people who hate democracy and hate the American people because they cannot stand that the people overwhelmingly chose to elect Donald Trump and send him back to the White House. So they are seeking other means to get their way and to try to remove him from that position.
I have an article that I wrote this morning. If people go to worldviewtimes.com, I'll go over there real quick, worldviewtimes.com. I have an article I wrote right here. The left's dangerous call for violence, a Marxist plot to ignite civil war. I'll go through it tonight on Brandon House Live. But I detail not all, but a lot of the things that have been said by Comey, Joe Biden, Maxine Waters, different people saying things that I think is gaslighting people, particularly Islamist, Marxist, the mentally unstable. I think they're gaslighting for some kind of conflict. I really do.
There's no doubt about it. I mean, that's the current method of winning for Democrats. They create chaos and then they blame the chaos on the people they're targeting. It is.
That's funny you said that, because that's what I wrote. That's what I wrote in my article. I said, let's expose their words and deeds as the evidence screams of a red-green strategy between the Marxists and the Islamists as the globalists use them to bring chaos, then blame conservatives and Christians for the chaos due to their intolerance and worldview.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way they do things. It's very Alinsky-ite, you know.
Yes.
These rules for radicals, which he did very notably
Dedicate to Satan, to Lucifer.
Satan, thank you. Yeah, and listen, that is a Luciferian way of doing things. I urge Christians to read Ephesians 6, recognizing that though we don't do battle with flesh and blood in a sense, it's against principalities and powers. Don't forget, principalities and powers are organized things, and they show themselves through government institutions. I have this book here I've been reading recently by Oscar Kuhlman. It's called The State in the New Testament. It's kind of a technical theological book that talks about this issue. I think people need to understand that this is a spiritual force that is really outrageous, that is operating in an evil way. Now, when it comes to James Comey, remember, this is the guy, when talking about the Michael Flynn thing on some interview he did, I think on MSNBC.
Yes.
He said, what about those guys going there? He says, I sent them. Like, he was literally sending people into the Trump White House to take the Trump White House down. He's admitted it publicly. It is not inconsistent with his other public statements that he put out what I believe is a veiled threat towards encouraging people to assassinate Donald Trump. And what's really scary about it when a guy like James Comey does this is that it's not like he doesn't still have contacts with certain people in the Trump administration. You know, that they still haven't eliminated all the problems. And this is what, to me, is very scary about when you see two assassination attempts on Donald Trump. One thwarted and one thankfully unsuccessful, when actually it was successful. He just shot the bullet at the wrong time. So I believe Tulsi Gabbard later in that statement says that she thinks he should be in jail. If there's not already a grand jury impaneled on this issue and with some intent of going towards an indictment of James Comey and throwing him in jail and prosecuting him, then it's very frustrating, because this is a prosecutable offense.
Well, everybody is screaming and hollering, rightfully so, about wanting to see perp walks, wanting to see some of the deep staters perp walked and charged. Well, here's your chance. So the DOJ has been handed a real gift here in one sense, because here's your chance. Here's your chance to do what you should do, not because it's political payback, because it's according to the law, and to show that there are not two scales of justice, not two standards. So they didn't say this. They didn't tweet this or Instagram this or put this out. Comey did. And Comey should be, as you say, indicted and arrested. And here is the DOJ of Donald Trump. Here's a golden opportunity to show the American people there is only one rule of law. And I pray they take it.
I do. Keep this in mind. Now, Comey will probably utilize it to put himself back on the grand stage and take on Donald Trump in a way. So there's always a battle with this, and that will be very evil if and when he does that. But think about what we're dealing with here. We just talked about all the things that James Comey is doing and has done, but consider Letitia James. Letitia James right now is rightly being investigated for lying on multiple mortgage documents in the state of Virginia, where she claimed residency as a way to facilitate a mortgage. She's lied. It's disgusting what she's done. And then you consider all that was happening with, oh gosh, what's her face down in Georgia? Why am I forgetting the prosecutor's name there?
Letitia James.
No, Letitia James is in New York. I forgot the lady in Georgia, but the Cobb County district attorney down there, she was having an affair with a man. She was called out for it. She actually was pulled off the case, thankfully. But when you look at these, they start to add up, and you recognize that at the heart of all of this is an hypocrisy where what they try to accuse Donald Trump or Republicans in general of are the very things they do with impunity on a regular basis because the system favors them.
Yep.
This needs to be cleaned up.
100%. 100%. Let's see. Well, I got to get that. What was that gal's name, Logan? Fannie Willis. Thank you.
Fannie Willis, yeah.
Yeah.
Or Fonnie, as she insists, whatever.
Fonnie, yeah, whatever. Let's see here. I actually found that clip of Comey bragging about sending the FBI to General Flynn. I think this is it right here. Yep. Here, watch and listen to this, guys.
It's hard to imagine 2 FBI agents ending up in the sit room. How did that happen?
I sent them. Something I probably wouldn't have done or maybe gotten away with in a more organized investigation, a more organized administration, in the George W. Bush administration, for example, or the Obama administration. The protocol, 2 men that all of us have perhaps increased appreciation for over the last 2 years. And in both of those administrations, there was process. And so if the FBI wanted to send agents into the White House itself to interview a senior official, you would work through the White House counsel, and there'd be discussions and approvals and who would be there. And I thought, it's early enough, let's just send a couple guys over. And so we placed a call to Flynn, said, hey, we're sending a couple guys over. Hope you'll talk to them. He said, sure. Nobody else was there. They interviewed him in a conference room at the White House Situation Room, and he lied to them. And that's what he's now pled guilty to.
What did he think they were coming over there for?
I don't think he knew. No, we didn't tell him. Just said, we got sending over a couple of agents. I want to ask you some questions. I didn't have this conversation. My deputy director did. But hope you got a few minutes. You can sit down and talk to them. And he said, sure.
Jim?
And now we know they lied. I mean, that's the whole thing. He brazenly also claims that Michael Flynn lied, which he did not. No, James Comey lied. He's a liar. At his core, he's a liar. It's kind of interesting. Senator Mike Lee put up a post this week as this was playing out, noting the fact that when Senator Lee was working as an assistant U.S. attorney in Salt Lake City, Comey came and gave what he described as a very inspiring speech. And the content of it would have seemed inspiring based upon his account of it. And then noting how far the guy has gone off the rails. And that is absolutely true. But that happens in Washington, D.C. It happens to members of Congress, happens to people who work in the administration. Many of them go there with idealism. By the way, some with very crass motivations for their self-promotion. But, many go in idealistically or with certain principles that are clear, and then they abandon them over time because you figure out that there is not a strong enough check on what happens in Washington. There is not strong enough, there's not a system to hold these people that's strong enough to hold them accountable. Now, Donald Trump's changing that, and this is one reason why I think Comey does need to be indicted.
Absolutely. And don't forget, here we go. Former FBI Director Comey testified to the House Intel Committee that FBI agents did not believe Michael Flynn intentionally lied about talks with Russia's ambassador, according to a newly unredacted report from the committee. That's what Catherine Herridge reported back in 2018. TheConservativeCaucus.org, TheConservativeCaucus.org, the president, not the executive director, Jim Paff. Jim, hope you have a great weekend.
You too, Brandon. Thank you.
Jim Paff checking in from our nation's capital there in Washington, D.C. Hope you'll check out his website, theconservativecaucus.org. And don't forget, brought to you in part by our foundation, this free broadcast, worldviewfoundation.com. Take care.
You're watching Worldview 2, built on the 35 years of Worldview books, documentaries, research, high-profile interviews, and the radio and television broadcasts of Brannon House.
Tonight on the Worldview Report, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services is planning to drop CDC recommendations for routine COVID-19 vaccines for pregnant women, teens, and children. The FBI, they foiled an Islamic terrorist attack on a U.S. Army base in Michigan. The Austin, Texas Police Department arrested one of 4 suspects this week for the murder of InfoWars reporter Jamie White. That was outside his Texas home that he was murdered on March 9th. President Trump rounds out his Middle East tour with another trillion-dollar trade deal, this time with Qatar. If you thought the Muslims were just making a play for Texas, think again. Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, a Democrat and Jewish, just announced a $5 million grant funded by taxpayers to the Al-Aqsa Islamic Society of Philadelphia in order to expand its K-12 Muslim school. And a long-awaited report confirms what we already knew. NATO is full of corruption. All these stories and more as the Worldview Report begins right now.
This is Worldview Report with host Brandon House. Whether it is news from the nation's capital or your state capital, from the classroom to the boardroom, from national security to national and local news that impacts you and your family, Worldview Report is your trusted source for vital and uncensored news. And now, here is Brandon House.
Good evening and welcome to the Worldview Report. Leading off tonight, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services is planning to drop CDC recommendations for routine COVID-19 vaccines for pregnant women, teens, and children. That's what the Wall Street Journal reported on Thursday, citing people that are familiar with the matter. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, which is part of the HHS, they recommend that individuals aged 6 months and older should be given an updated COVID-19 vaccine, regardless of previous inoculations for the disease. It was not clear if the department is planning to remove the recommendation entirely for those groups or just suggest that patients talk with their doctors about risk and benefits. That's what the report said. As of April 26, about 14% of pregnant women and 13% of children had received the updated COVID vaccine. That's according to the CDC. In the U.S., 3 COVID shots have been authorized for emergency use, even though there's no emergency and never has been when it comes to COVID and children. The 3 injections include an mRNA gene-based shot from Moderna and Pfizer, along with Novavax's protein-based shot. HHS, well, of course, it's led by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and he is, as we know, a longtime critic of mass vaccination campaigns. He is largely responsible for blowing the whistle on the fact that no childhood vaccines have ever been subjected to full-blown clinical trials with randomized placebos and other mainstays of scientific procedures. U.S. Food and Drug Administration Commissioner Martin Makary had also